And it kind of got me thinking, like, if these are the people at our elite universities who are, benefiting from our education, participating in, taxpayer-funded research, how deep does the rabbit hole go? And it turns out, if you really dig into it, not just academia, but, the nonprofit world, big tech, uh, pretty much any corner of American life you can think of, the Chinese government has some kind of presence.
Welcome to Deep Dive. Here at the Washington Examiner, we dig deep into what's happening behind the scenes in the nation's capital. And this week we have someone who's in the trenches to give us clear insight. Robert Schmad, an investigative reporter at the Washington Examiner, has been watching the Chinese Communist Party's influence in the U.S., particularly how they have made inroads with the U.S. government, tech, and higher education. For more, we turn to Robert. Well, welcome to the show, Robert. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be on.
So your recent reporting has uncovered some really concerning connections between American institutions and the Chinese Communist Party. What initially sparked your interest into looking about these investigations?
Yeah, so when I was in college, my alma mater had a fair number of Chinese international students, and some of the things I'd hear these students say in casual conversation, sort of concerned me, like apologia for the regime's treatment of ethnic minorities in China's far west, stuff like that. And it kind of got me thinking, like, if these are the people at our elite universities who are benefiting from our education, participating in, taxpayer-funded research, how deep does the rabbit hole go? And it turns out, if you really dig into it, higher, not just academia, but, the nonprofit world, big tech, pretty much any, corner of American life you can think of, the Chinese government has some kind of presence. And I just think, given that America and the Chinese Communist Party have this adversarial relationship, it's in the interest of the American people to dredge up, these ties and make it public so people can understand, if they're interacting with this university or if they're on this tech platform, what possible Chinese influence could be at play.
Sure. And one of your stories highlights how several prominent liberal philanthropies have significant investments in Chinese companies, some of which are linked to human rights abuses. So can you explain the scope of these investments and name some of the specific foundations and companies involved?
Yeah, so we are talking about tens of millions of dollars in stock in corporations that one that the Department of Defense has designated as being either influenced by or directly controlled by the Chinese military, as well as corporations with links, again, back to the Uyghur genocide. For one specific example, the Gates Foundation is probably one of the largest holders of stocks like these among American liberal philanthropies. And they have a huge holding in Tencent, which is this Chinese tech conglomerate. A lot of the popular mobile video games are developed by Tencent. A lot of media that you might not even be aware of is produced by Tencent. WeChat, one of the most popular messaging apps in the world, is run by Tencent. And it's kind of concerning, A, that the Gates Foundation has a stake in this corporation, and B, that it's operating in the United States, because, its co-founder, or rather its founder, Pony Ha-Teng, is very much a cheerleader for the CCP. He served in the National People's Congress as a member of the Chinese Communist Party. He's collaborated with the regime on censorship projects. It should be concerning to Americans that some of the largest philanthropies in the country, philanthropies that aren't strictly political, that do normal charitable work, have a vested interest in the financial well-being of firms linked to the Chinese Communist Party. I think that should be concerning because that might inform how they decide to conduct their work. And I think for obvious reasons, that is something Americans should be concerned about.
Sure. And some of these foundations claim these investments are through passive index funds. So what does that mean, and does it absolve them of responsibility in your opinion?
To the second question, no, I think people are obviously the holdings in these index funds are oftentimes public. You can go through uh, one of the investment firms that kind of bundle these stocks together and figure out, hey, do I want to invest in this, or would I prefer not to have my funds linked to this? So they're aware that they hold positions in this. If it's indirect, I don't think that's really material because they still, A, do own these shares, and B, are still linking the financial well-being of their foundation to these Chinese companies. And to the point of these sort of passive index funds, I think that's another sort of problematic angle we've explored is a lot of investment firms will bundle in problematic Chinese state-run corporations into investment funds held by millions of Americans who maybe don't have the same resources as these large global philanthropies who can't do this due diligence and are sort of unwittingly having their investment dollars going to support the work of corporations linked to the Chinese government and to the People's Liberation Army.
Interesting. And critics argue that there's a hypocrisy at play here with these foundations supporting human rights initiatives in the US, while at the same time profiting from companies linked to abuses in China. So how do you see that contradiction?
If I'm remembering correctly, the Rockefeller Brothers Fund held some stock in Daqo New Energy, which is a solar panel component manufacturer that had contracts in China's far west and had been exposed for benefiting from forced Uyghur slave labor. Now, the Rockefeller Brothers Foundation is a massive philanthropy that does a lot of work in the vein of human rights, gay rights, ethnic minorities, all of that stuff, while at the same time holding stock in a company that is incredibly accused of benefiting from an operation that the United States and other international observers have labeled as an ethnic genocide. And human rights aside, there were also some investments we found in Chinese state-run oil companies. A lot of these nonprofits are sort of openly very pro-environmental, and there's sort of a contradiction there because China's state-run oil company does not have the best, ecological track record. A lot of oil spills, stuff like that. So there are a lot of contradictions sort of borne out by these holdings.
And what kind of documentation did you have to go through to uncover these investments? And what was the most challenging aspect of tracking this money?
Yeah, so it's all out there in these foundations' IRS Form 990s. Every year, American 501(c)(3)s that have above a certain revenue threshold are required to disclose certain information about themselves, and included among this are their stock holdings. So that was just in these it wasn't just dredging through hundreds of pages of tax documents effectively to find this. I actually think the most difficult part is knowing what they hold right now, because due to the way IRS reporting rules work, we're always sort of playing catch up with what we can know about these foundations, because these documents I looked at were filed in like early 2025, but they only covered up like through early 2024. So we don't know what financial interests these liberal philanthropies had, how integrated with China they are at the moment, which makes it difficult to sort of scrutinize and fairly evaluate their actions at the moment.
Right, it's not in real time, as you're saying. And so your reporting also reveals how tech giants like Google and Meta are in different ways enabling the spread of Chinese state-run propaganda. So can you break down how Google News and Meta's advertising platforms are being used?
Yeah, so on the first point, as it relates to Google News, China has a massive network of state-run and state-funded media outlets that it uses to push pro-CCP narratives in through a platform that appears, at least ostensibly neutral. CGTN is one of the major outlets here. There's some more openly ideological outlets like the People's Daily, which is the official newspaper of the CCP, and the People's Youth Daily, which is the official paper of the CCP's youth wing. But all of this to say is that China has a very large and robust global news operation, and Google sort of aids it in its goal of pushing these pro-CCP narratives by recommending articles by CGTN through Google News, which is its flagship news aggregator. It reaches hundreds of millions of people, or around 100 million people per month. So has a huge reach, and it'll recommend articles from CGTN, outlet run by the propaganda department of the CCP, to users. And as it relates to these other outlets, it'll like label them as news because it's on the Google News platform. It's under the news tab. It sort of serves to whitewash and legitimize Chinese communist propaganda. As it relates to Meta, Meta actually takes money from these same outlets to run ads on its platform. So you have Meta directly profiting from the Chinese Communist Party's efforts to push its propaganda in Western onto Western audiences. And I should note, it's very interesting. A lot of these efforts have been focused in Latin America, in Europe, and in regions of Africa, regions where the United States and China are sort of engaged in these uh, influence battles, trying to, win friends on the global stage to spurn the other. So it all sort of melds into China's, broader uh, designs on global influence.
Interesting. And perhaps the most alarming aspect of your reporting is to the extent which American universities are participating with or receiving funding from entities linked to the Chinese military and the CCP. Can you give us some specific examples of these partnerships and the potential risks that they pose?
Definitely. So what we found that dozens of American colleges and universities maintain relationships with Chinese colleges or universities that are in some way linked to China's defense apparatus. Maybe they're conducting military research, maybe they're training members of the Chinese, future members of the Chinese armed forces. Perhaps they in the past been found to engage in like defense espionage, universities like this. So sort of players that are openly adversarial to the United States. And I think perhaps the most alarming relationships we have here are between universities that China considers its seven sons of national defense and American universities. These are like sort of China's premier like military research institutions. They've been linked to technology theft and have deep, deep ties to the People's Liberation Army. And we found four different universities with links to just one of these, Beijing Institute of Technology, which is sort of the crown jewel of the Seven Sons. That institution, just for reference, hosts 10 major defense labs. Something like a third of its graduates go on to work in China's defense sector, so very deeply integrated into China's military-industrial complex. And despite this, the University of New Mexico, the University of Kentucky, North Carolina State University, all of these maintain relationships with the Beijing Institute of Technology. The University of New Mexico's, for instance, their program uh, provides a business organizational leadership program for students coming out of this university. So you can kind of imagine how a sizable portion of these graduates from the Beijing Institute of Technology go on to work in the Chinese military, right? So we're taking those students, providing them with an American administrative education, and then sending them back to China to then work for the armed forces or for the defense industry of our chief adversary. And I think it's pretty obvious why that can be seen as concerning. We've had so many examples in just the past few years of Chinese international students engaging in activities that seem sort of contrary to our national security. Just in 2023, you had like a handful of Chinese students at the University of Michigan caught taking pictures of a major National Guard base where we conduct joint exercises with Taiwan. It's pretty obvious what's going on there. So all of this to say is that these dozens of relationships really lend themselves to expanding the security vulnerabilities that we have here in the United States.
And it sounds like that it's not just Chinese students. So you found that many graduates from U.S. universities are going to work for Chinese companies. Are these the Chinese, or are you also talking about Americans as well?
Oh, it goes both ways. I think one thing that's sort of under discussed is that we have these uh, research institutions that are supported using American tax dollars that receive, not that have this nonprofit status, and they're supposed to serve the public benefit. I mean, that is the stated purpose of why we give universities tax exempt status. But at the same time, they are in some number training people to then go over to China, some of them being Americans, and work for corporations who are actively seeking to undermine America's position abroad. Corporations that are, for instance, involved in China's Belt and Road Initiative, which is a sort of global infrastructure investment scheme that China is using to kind of buy influence in the developing world. So I think it's worth interrogating why publicly supported universities are expending their resources in a way that is benefiting China.
Interesting. And the Trump administration took steps to increase scrutiny of foreign funding to universities. Are those efforts still in place, and are they sufficient to address the problem?
I'm not unsure of the exact deadline, but universities, so under the Biden administration, universities were required to disclose how much money they received from each foreign country. but not who was donating that money or for what purpose. And that obviously leaves a massive transparency gap. Among the first things that President Donald Trump did upon taking office was sign an executive order directing the Secretary of Education to enforce the law such that universities will now have to disclose both who they got the funds from, in what amount, and for what purpose, which will give the American public much more transparency as to how foreign countries, be it Qatar, be it China, be it the United Kingdom, are influencing higher education in the United States. Will it stop the problem? Not necessarily. I don't think so. I think it is incumbent on universities to understand that the American public supports them, again, through tax breaks and through direct funding, to act in accordance with the public good. And these voluntary partnerships they enter into with the Chinese government, these donations they take from Chinese business people, all of these things that lend themselves to increase Chinese influence on American campuses and in the broader United States do not serve the public interest or the public good, and therefore are unbefitting of an American university.
I see. And I know this is sensitive, but did you receive any pushback from the universities you contacted or any difficulty in obtaining information?
Um, it's interesting. The universities were very mum on this. I will say, credit where credit is due. The tech companies who I've covered in this kind of topic have been very open to dialogue and trying to figure out what's going on. In fact, with Meta, I flagged that the China Youth Daily, as we discussed, the official paper of the youth wing of the Chinese Communist Party, was not labeled as state-run media on Facebook. And when I flagged it to them, they're like, "Oh yeah, that's a mistake. Let's fix that." So there's that example. Tech companies, in my experience, have been very willing to engage in dialogue with us as it relates to this issue. The universities, however, were very silent. I think Stanford was the only one to get back to us for that piece that we wrote, and they sort of just gave us a nothing statement explaining that yes, we do have a joint campus on Tsinghua University. So what? Yeah, I think that about sums it up.
After all of your research, what's your biggest takeaway? What do you think is the most important thing for Americans to understand about these connections between U.S. institutions and the CCP?
Well, I think Americans should be aware that they, in the eyes of the CCP, have very valuable eyeballs. The Chinese Communist Party spends tens of billions of dollars a year on influence operations like this, like just their media operations alone. CGTN, these newspapers and digital outlets we discussed earlier, and north of 10 million per year just on that. So there is a huge effort to shape American minds, to push you in a direction ideologically that's more aligned with the CCP. I think you need to be conscious of that and also understand that what's publicly reported is by no means the full extent of China's influence campaign, especially given the kind of reined in enforcement policies of the current DOJ as it relates to FARA enforcement. It's very possible that there are a lot of unregistered foreign agents running around pushing pro-CCP narratives without disclosing it to the proper authorities. So I suppose if you read something on social media, if you see a news article, something comes out of a university and it seems like it has the fingerprints of the CCP on it, it just might. So be cognizant of that, keep vigilant, and just be aware. The takeaway is be aware that the Chinese are spending a whole lot of treasure trying to get you to think a certain way, and be vigilant of that.
It's very eye-opening. Robert, thank you so much for your thorough reporting. We really enjoy it and can't wait to see what you come up with next.
For sure. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you so much for watching Deep Dive. Please visit our website for more of these investigations and feel free to send us your questions or story ideas. We hope to see you back here next week.